In a quiet rural town, a seemingly ordinary pregnant farmer becomes the last line of defense against a ruthless criminal syndicate. But what her enemies don't know is that beneath her calm exterior lies a shocking past. A Green Beret sniper trained for war, ready to turn the tide. This isn't just a story about survival. It's a gripping tale of strategy, resilience, and tactical brilliance, where every move counts and underestimation is a deadly mistake. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now, let's jump in. On the quiet edges of rural Montana, where the mountains watch like silent sentinels and neighbors are miles apart, life moves with the rhythm of the land, steady, slow, predictable. It's the kind of place where the loudest sounds are the wind over the wheat fields or the soft clatter of a tractor engine. Crime feels like a foreign language here, violence a distant story from the cities. But that's exactly why a crew like the Hollow Vultures picked this place. The Vultures weren't amateurs. They were a roaming gang specializing in pressuring isolated landowners, extortion, sabotage, forced sales. They rolled through small towns like a dust storm, swallowing farms and ranches for their shadowy benefactor, someone building a private corridor through these lands. And when a farmer refused to sell, the Vultures made sure the next crop to grow would be fear on their map. The Harfield farm looked like the softest target yet. A widowed woman, no nearby family, a remote property. And most of all, pregnant 7 months in. A farmer's slow, predictable life. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Caroline Harfield's steady hands had once calibrated sniper windage in the dead of Afghan winters. That the woman now tending crops had once crawled through razor wire in the dead of night with a suppressed rifle strapped to her back. That before she grew wheat, she harvested targets for the United States Army Special Forces, Green Beret, 2nd Battalion Elite Sniper Team. Caroline had buried that life when her husband died. She wanted the baby to grow up away from that world, among golden fields instead of gunmetal skies. She'd bought this land for peace, for silence, for safety. But the Vultures were coming, and peace was off the table now. It started with anonymous letters, offers to buy the farm at a fraction of its worth. Then came the intimidation: slash tires on her truck, a dead coyote carcass nailed to her fence. When Caroline found the surveillance drone hovering low over her fields, she realized this wasn't just pressure. This was targeting. She dusted off an old footlocker buried beneath the barn's floorboards. Inside, an M110 sniper system, still clean, still greased. Next to it, a weathered notebook filled with range cards, wind drift tables, and an old habit tactical doodles and contingency sketches. Caroline placed a calm hand on her belly. "You picked the wrong farm," she whispered, before nightfall. She remapped her property, measured sightlines, identified natural choke points, and just like that, the quiet farmer became something else, a strategist reawakening. But this wouldn't be a sprint. She'd learned patience. She had 7 months' worth of it. The Vultures were still circling, oblivious to the crosshairs now trained on them. The Hollow Vultures didn't attack all at once. That wasn't their style. They preferred to poke first, test the fence for weaknesses, scare the prey, and make them beg for mercy before the hammer dropped. On the second morning, Caroline spotted the first probe. A pair of strangers parked a black SUV half a mile down the dirt road, pretending to be lost. They stayed long enough to fly another drone over her western fence line, just out of range for a casual rifle shot but not out of reach for Caroline's M110 with a suppressor attached. She let them go. The first rule of perimeter defense: don't reveal capability too soon. That night, she sketched the drone's flight path in her notebook, calculating where they'd mapped the weakest ingress. Predictably, it was the northeast pasture, lower fencing, fewer natural obstacles, a forgotten storage shed that hadn't been touched in months. Caroline smiled. She'd seen this play before. If they wanted her to notice a weak point, it was likely misdirection. But she'd built kill zones in worse terrain. Over the next 3 days, the Vultures escalated. They vandalized the power lines feeding her house. They torched a nearby haystack and left a threatening message scrawled in gasoline across the dirt: "Sell or burn." Classic psychological warfare designed to isolate and exhaust. But Caroline didn't rattle easily. She'd spent years evading counter-snipers who could kill with a heartbeat's hesitation. She'd cracked under worse storms and patched herself back up. She contacted Sheriff Nolan, an old friend of her late husband. But he was spread thin, understaffed, outgunned, and likely on the vulture's payroll. His words were careful. They've got friends in low places, Caroline. I can't stop them from coming. But if they disappear, well, in this part of the county, who's going to come asking? His meaning was clear. The law wouldn't get in her way. So she went to work. Caroline rigged the northeast pasture with camouflage tripwire alerts tied to empty beer cans filled with ball bearings. She constructed a false blind spot, an obviously neglected section of fence with a fake breach subtly reinforcing the ground around it to control their approach. A classic channeling tactic. She used her old ballistic maps to raise zero the M110 for this particular terrain and dug a shallow sniper hide beneath a stack of rusted equipment near the tree line. Barely big enough for her and her growing belly. Tight concealment was non-negotiable. A night, she monitored their movements through thermal binoculars from her attic. The vultures sent small teams to stalk the perimeter, emboldened by her apparent isolation. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Caroline had already marked them. She memorized their walk cycles, their patrol patterns, even the nervous twitch of the guy chewing gum to fast. When she finally squeezed the trigger, it wouldn't be a warning shot. It would be a message, and by then, it would already be too late. It was the fourth night when the vultures finally took the bait. Two of them, scouts with more arrogance than experience, breached the fake blind spot on the northeast fence, moving with clumsy overconfidence. Their steps were light, their rifles slung carelessly, their body armor mismatched and dirty. To them, this was a soft job, a scared, pregnant farmer, an easy payday. Caroline watched from her sniper hide, her breathing steady, her pulse slow. She had lain motionless for 2 hours, wrapped in a ghillie suit. She'd stitched herself from old netting and farm scraps. The distant hum of insects filled the air, masking the faint clicks of her rifle's adjustment knobs. The two scouts whispered as they advanced toward the storage shed. She'd deliberately left ajar. They thought they were hunting. They thought they were in control. Caroline's gloved finger rested on the trigger. She adjusted her scope's parallax, accounting for the soft crosswinds sweeping in from the south. She could hear their footsteps now. 10 more yards and they tripped the first alert. Click. The soda can alarm rattled softly behind them. One of the men spun around, cursing under his breath, realizing they'd been funneled. But before panic could fully ignite in his chest, Caroline exhaled, calm, precise. The suppressed shot punched clean through his neck, dropping him instantly. His partner froze, wide-eyed, unsure where the shot had come from. He didn't even have time to key his radio before Caroline stitched a second round through his shoulder, forcing him to the ground. She waited, watched, measured his desperation as he dragged himself behind a pile of broken fencing. His breathing was erratic. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his radio, stammering incomplete code words. Caroline's voice crackled through his earpiece, calm, deliberate. Try it again. Slower this time. The man jolted, realizing she was patched into their cums. You're hunting a farmer, she said softly. But the farmer is hunting you. She let that sit, then cut the frequency. His frantic calls brought 2 more men into the trap, both more aggressive, scanning wildly for her position. She watched as they swept the area, their muzzles jittering, their discipline collapsing under pressure. Caroline circled wide, using her intimate knowledge of the terrain to reposition. She left the sniper rifle in place, its thermal signature bait for the careless. When the lead thug paused to inspect the hide, Caroline slipped behind him with a suppressed Glock drawn, pressing the muzzle to his temple. Eyes up, she whispered. His hands shot into the air, but his partner turned too late. Caroline's knife met him first, clean and silent. To the surviving thug, she offered one sentence. Tell your boss, if he sends boys to my farm, I send them back in bags. She pistol whipped him hard enough to knock him cold and dragged his body to the fence line. The message had been sent, but Caroline knew better. This wouldn't scare them off. It would only make them come harder. The next morning, Caroline monitored the dirt road from her attic perch as a convoy of 3 matte black pickups rumbled toward the farm. More men this time, heavier weapons. They weren't pretending anymore. The vultures had underestimated her once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Their new field leader, a man called Rix, stepped out, wearing tactical gloves and wraparound sunglasses that didn't quite hide the scars slicing across his jaw. He had the look of a man who'd spent time in paramilitary work, confident, brutal, impatient. He barked orders, fanning his squad out to sweep the perimeter. Caroline recognized the shift immediately. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was an organized assault. Her fingers drummed against her notebook as she flipped through sketches of fallback positions, flank routes, and secondary traps. She had prepared for this. She'd always prepared for this. First delay. She triggered the first line of defenses remotely. Homemade caltrips scattered across the main approach. The front pickup skidded as its tires blew out, sending the vehicle lurching into a shallow ditch. Men spilled out, guns raised, cursing. Their formation instantly fractured. Caroline's voice crackled over the open coms. "You can send more trucks. I have more ditches." Rix paused, his jaw tightening. "You're going to regret this, sweetheart." "I'm 7 months pregnant," Caroline replied. "I already regret a lot of things, but this isn't one of them." His scowl deepened as he cut the channel. Caroline shifted position, moving to the East Barnes loft, where she'd stashed an old bolt-action rifle fitted with an improvised suppressor. It wasn't elegant, but at this range, it didn't need to be. She tracked the team Rix had dispatched to flank her and sent a round through their radio operator's backpack, severing coms with a clean crack. Confusion spread like wildfire. Isolated, disorganized, angry, she let them scramble. Caroline was playing chess. They were flipping the board when they tried to breach the west side gate. She detonated a small charge that collapsed a stack of irrigation pipes, pinning 2 men beneath the tangle of steel. Non-lethal, intentional. She wanted survivors, people who would carry the story. Rix adjusted his plan, bringing in a drone to track her. Caroline had anticipated this. She deployed a reflective decoy tarp over an old tractor, tricking the drone's thermal sensors. When they converged on the heat signature, Caroline slipped into her prepared foxhole and picked off another pair of assailants from a new angle, forcing them to rethink their approach yet again. Every move they made, she was already 3 steps ahead, but Caroline knew her advantage wouldn't last forever. Numbers eventually close gaps. Ammunition runs out. Fatigue sets in. She needed a force multiplier. That's when she made the call. A single message to a number she hadn't dialed in years. "They've come. Need eyes." The reply came swiftly. "Coordinates." She sent them. No names, no explanation needed. Old allies don't ask. They just come. The next phase was about to begin. 3 hours later, the first dust cloud appeared on the horizon, coming fast, low to the ground, like a memory returning at full throttle. Caroline watched from the attic window, her breathing steady as the distant shapes resolved into 2 dirt bikes and a battered pickup truck unmarked. Familiar. The bikes cut across the wheat field with surgical precision, weaving through natural obstacles like they'd been born on this land. The truck followed, its front bumper still bearing dents from a long-forgotten deployment overseas, when the bike skidded to a stop near the eastern tree line. 2 riders dismounted: Sergeant Dale Stick Morrison and Fiona Rain. Both ghosts from Caroline's former unit, both presumed long retired. They weren't. Stick still wore the same crooked grin, the same duct-taped helmet, the same love for creative explosives. Fiona's movements were as sharp as ever, her compact frame carrying a suppressed MP5 slung across her chest. The truck door slammed, and Ramon Velez stepped out, communications specialist, former Green Beret, tactical wizard. He didn't waste time with greetings. He simply tossed Caroline a small earpiece, net secure. "We're up." Caroline inserted the piece and grinned. "Didn't think you'd come. Didn't think you'd call." Fiona shot back, already scanning the terrain. "Pregnant? Seriously?" Multitasking, Caroline deadpanned. Stick walked past them, dropping a satchel bag brimming with homemade charges. "Your neighbor's going to mind a few fireworks? They'll think it's thunder." The banter was brief. Old rhythm, old trust. None of them needed a full debrief to know what was happening. The vultures were about to walk into a battle they couldn't comprehend. Rix's men were repositioning for a more aggressive push, bringing heavier rifles, steel shields, and portable jammers. They expected to win this time. They didn't know Caroline wasn't alone anymore. Inside the barn, the 4 of them gathered around Caroline's notebook, now covered in hand-sketched battle plans, windage corrections, and crude kill zone markings. "Phase 1 is containment," Caroline explained. "Phase 2 is controlled collapse. We keep them moving where we want them. We strip their coms. We break their will." Stick grinned. "Sounds like a party." "Ramon, can you cut their drone feed?" she asked. "Done. I've got their whole channel mapped. I can spoof their GPS next if you want." "Good. Feed them false movements. We'll herd them east." She pointed at the map. Here's where they'll make their last stand, right under the grain silo. They'll think it's cover. It's not. Let me guess. Fiona smirked. Explosives inside. Caroline's voice was ice cold, enough to make them regret picking this farm. The plan was tight, a controlled chessboard. If the vultures pushed hard, they'd be buried under a cascade of calculated responses. If they hesitated, they'd bleed from 1,000 tactical cuts, overcomes. Rick sparked new orders, unaware his network was fully compromised. Sweep the East Ridge. Burn the storage sheds. We push now. Permission granted. Caroline whispered, and the hunt resumed. The hollow vultures came hard. Rick's convoy split into 2 assault teams, sweeping east as the falsified drone feed lured them toward the grain silo. Caroline's misdirection worked flawlessly. Ramon's GPS spoofing projected phantom heat signatures near the storage sheds, and the vultures committed fully to chasing ghosts. Caroline's team sprang into motion with military precision. Stick moved first, placing shaped charges along the narrow dirt path the vultures were now funneling into. His movements were fast but methodical, weaving detonation cord through fence posts like braided rope. Charges primed. He called overcomes. Ready to make some noise. Stand by, Caroline ordered. Fiona flanked wide, positioning herself atop an abandoned grain truck to secure overwatch with her MP5. She could cut off retreat paths if things turned chaotic. Her voice came through crisp and focused. I've got eyes. They're committing. No back door. Ramon set up a scrambler near the northern tree line, quietly collapsing the vulture's ability to coordinate. They're blind. Interference online. Comes our Swiss cheese. Caroline settled back into her sniper hide near the eastern ridge, the rifle steady in her hands. She watched Rick's men trudge forward, fanning out with rifles raised, kicking in shed doors, sweeping empty structures. Frustration mounting. Check that shack. One bark.it was a decoy, rigged with a simple noise trap that triggered a cascade of falling barrels, simulating movement inside. The vultures opened fire on nothing. Caroline, let them burn precious seconds. Then she spoke on their frequency again, calm and surgical. You're shooting at shadows. I'm over here. Before they could react, Caroline's suppressed shot found the team's point man, his helmet snapping back as he crumpled silently into the grass. Rick barked into his radio. Where the hell is she? Move, move. But his men were sluggish, pinned by confusion, false contacts, and the creeping realization they were being played. Stick's charges detonated along the dirt path, forcing the rear convoy to scatter. Vehicles stalled. Men dove for cover. Smoke plumbed in controlled columns, not deadly, but disorienting, exactly as Caroline intended. Fiona opened up from her perch, short bursts targeting knees and shoulders. Wounding, not killing. Sowing panic without thinning the herd to quickly fall back. Regroup at the silo. Rick's voice cracked under the strain, exactly where Caroline wanted them. The vultures stumbled toward the grain silo, a towering metal structure Caroline had meticulously prepared. Inside, Stick had loaded low-yield charges designed to rupture the silo's structural supports, not to kill, but to trap. Caroline called it stage to collapse. Trigger when ready. Stick's finger hovered over the detonator. They're going to love this. Ramon fed Rick's team false thermal signatures deeper into the silo's base, making them think Caroline was pinned inside. They're about to lock themselves in, Ramon said, his grin audible. Wait, now. Stick thumbed the switch. Boom. The silo's side panels buckled, metal screaming as the entire structure folded inward, spilling a mountain of grain that buried the vulture's primary assault team under tons of suffocating weight. Survivors scrambled like ants in a collapsing nest. Caroline's voice cut through their remaining coms, clear and cold. You came to buy my land. I just sold you your grave. Silence followed, broken only by the distant rumble of retreating engines. But Rick's hadn't retreated. Not yet. He was still out there, still hunting. And Caroline wasn't done. The dust from the collapsed silo still hung in the air when Caroline heard the low growl of an approaching ATV. It tore across the eastern ridge, weaving through debris and abandoned vehicles. At the controls was Rick's, battle-worn, not beaten, sunglasses gone, eyes blazing with cold fury. He was coming for her personally. Now. You think this is over? He barked into his radio, unaware Ramon had re-established full control of the channel. I'm not leaving this dirt pile until I put her in the ground. Caroline's voice returned over the open frequency, sharp and deliberate, careful. Rix, you're making promises you can't keep. He veered hard toward the farmhouse, one hand on the controls, the other gripping an M4 with a custom short barrel. This wasn't tactical anymore. This was personal. Rage had overridden strategy. Good. Caroline wanted him desperate. Ramon confirmed it. I've got 3 more heat signatures on his tail. He's bringing the last of his muscle straight to you. Stick chimed in. Want me to light up the driveway? Negative. Caroline said firmly. I need him close. I want this one up close. She slipped from her sniper hide and moved toward the farmhouse, Glock holstered at her side, her pace steady despite the growing weight in her belly. 7 months along, every step a quiet act of defiance. Inside, she flipped the breaker, plunging the house into darkness, then sealed the outer doors with a homemade locking system rigged from farm equipment. She was turning her home into a choke point, tight angles, forced entry, no open ground for his men to fin out. As she moved, she locked eyes with Fiona through the attic window. I've got Overwatch, Fiona's voice crackled in her ear. No one gets out of that house without me knowing. I've got your north exit covered, Stick added. If they try to flank, I can light them up. Caroline's team was set. Now it was a waiting game. Rix's ATV skidded to a stop outside the front porch. He dismounted fast, switching to a shotgun as his remaining men flanked the door. Caroline waited behind the reinforced kitchen island, listening to their boots on the porch. Boom! The door exploded inward, Rix's preferred introduction. His men stormed in, weapons raised, slicing the rooms with sharp sweeps. Caroline let the first man step past the living room threshold before snapping up and firing. A double tap to the thigh dropped him screaming. She pivoted, sending a controlled shot into the second man's arm as he rounded the corner, disarming him instantly. Before Rix could react, Caroline's voice cut through the darkness. You're out of friends. He fired blindly toward the sound. Buckshot peppered the far wall as Caroline dropped low and slid behind the sofa, counting his remaining rounds. 2 more pumps. She waited for the second blast. Then the hollow click of an empty chamber. Caroline rose smoothly, Glock trained on him. You like kicking down doors? She asked, advancing. You ever wonder what's on the other side? Rix snarled, drawing his sidearm, but Caroline was faster. 2 shots. 1 to the knee, 1 to the shoulder. Disarmed, down. He gasped on the floor as she approached, gun unwavering. You think you're special? He spat. You're just another woman hiding behind a gun. Caroline knelt, pressing the barrel against his cheekbone. I'm not hiding. I was waiting. She keyed her comms. All clear. Stick's voice came back. Package delivered. Signed and bleeding. But she wasn't finished. Caroline hauled Rix by his vest and dragged him outside, leaving him slumped against his overturned ATV. She made sure his comms were still live, made sure his superiors were listening. This is my farm, she said, voice low and steady. You come here again. You don't just lose men. You lose everything. She dropped his radio onto his chest. Now go tell your boss what it's like to be hunted. Then she turned and walked away. The sun was dipping low when Fiona radioed from the attic. Movement to the south. Convoy retreating. Looks like they're cutting their losses. Stick followed, a grin in every syllable. Bet Rix is going to have fun explaining this to whoever signed his paycheck. Caroline holstered her Glock, the weight of the past hours settling into her muscles like a slow burn. She walked back toward the house, past debris, shell casings, bodies. Some had been taken by their own. Others would be left for the buzzards. She wasn't celebrating, not yet. In the barn, Caroline regrouped with her team. Ramon unpacked his signal interceptor. Fiona checked her ammo. Stick was already fiddling with another homemade explosive like it was a morning crossword. This was never just a land grab, Caroline said, unrolling a map marked with recent vulture activity circled in red. They're building something. A corridor. Smuggling lanes, maybe. But the coordination, the manpower, it's bigger than them. Ramon tapped his laptop. I scraped their comm logs before shutting them down. Cross-checked the radio signatures. Some of those frequencies aren't civilian. I'm talking encrypted military-grade bursts cycling through dozens of bands per minute. That's not gang tech, Fiona muttered, her brow tightening. It's not, Caroline confirmed. These guys weren't freelancing. Someone with serious backing is pushing them. Someone who thought they could muscle a pregnant woman off her land without consequence. Stick leaned back against a post, tossing a wrench into the air. So who's the big fish? Cartel? Corporate muscle? Private army? Too soon to tell, Caroline replied. But whoever they are, they sent a crew that didn't know what they were walking into. They won't make that mistake again. She glanced across her battered property, the broken fences, scattered shell casings, scorch marks near the collapsed silo. The battle was over, but the war was only introducing itself. Ramon pulled a fresh set of encrypted radios from his pack. You're going to need a new net. Tighter, quieter. Fiona tossed Caroline a spare magazine and a backup. You're not doing this alone again. Caroline's hand settled on her stomach, the faintest smile breaking her otherwise steely expression. Won't be alone. Not anymore. Stick stepped forward, eyebrow raised. You sure you're up for more of this? You've got, he gestured awkwardly toward her belly. I'm pregnant, Caroline said flatly. Not fragile. Stick smirked. Just checking. The team moved into motion without needing orders. It was a familiar rhythm, setting new defensive layers, re-establishing perimeter traps, sweeping for trackers or sensors the vultures might have planted. They worked as they had in the old days, tight, efficient. An unspoken understanding between them. As the sun dipped below the ridge, Caroline scanned the distant highway through her binoculars, watching the last of the vultures' convoy vanish over the horizon. She knew better than to think they wouldn't return. Next time they wouldn't bring sledgehammers. They'd bring scalpels. She keyed her radio. Double all traps. Rotate blind spots. Keep the net hot. Stick laughed. The vultures won't like what's waiting next time. They don't have to like it, Caroline said, her voice steady, her gaze unblinking. They just have to survive long enough to warn the next crew. And in the fading light, with wolves now waiting in the tall grass, Caroline Harfield began preparing for the next game of war. By dawn, her farm looked deceptively peaceful. Fresh tire tracks were the only visible scars from the night before. Beneath the quiet surface, the battlefield had evolved. Caroline sat with Ramon at the kitchen table, reviewing decrypted logs pulled from the vulture's communication system. His laptop buzzed with fragmented conversations, file headers, and obscure call signs that didn't match local gangs or known syndicates. Look at this pattern, Ramon said, tracing a series of timestamps. They're running encrypted bursts through multiple relays. This isn't just about buying farms. This is logistics. Someone's moving assets through rural backdoors. Caroline narrowed her eyes. What kind of assets? People? Cargo? Weapons? Hard to say. But they're building a pipeline. Fiona joined them, slinging her MP5 onto the table with a soft thud. I ran the plates on Rix's ATV, registered to a shell company out of Portland. No tax records. No legal footprint. It's a ghost, which means the real owner's hiding in the smoke, Caroline murmured. Stick's voice called from outside, muffled but insistent. Boss, you're going to want to see this. They followed him to the northern fence, where he'd unearthed a buried sensor, military grade, low power, remote transmitting. Looks like they were mapping us in real time, Stick said, tossing it to Caroline. She examined the device, flipping it over. It wasn't cheap, and it wasn't something the vultures picked up at a surplus store. The serial had been scraped off, a foreign manufacturer's imprint barely visible beneath the grime. Yeah, she muttered. They weren't freelancing. Ramon raised an eyebrow. You thinking corporate? Caroline shook her head slowly. I'm thinking contractors. Black budget. The kind of people who use gangs like the vultures as cannon fodder. She pocketed the sensor and looked out over her land. Her baby shifted slightly inside her. Time was running faster now. Whoever was backing the vultures would soon realize Rix's team hadn't just failed, they'd been dissected. They'd come again, smarter, sharper. We can't just sit here waiting for the next crew, Caroline said firmly. We hit first. Ramon smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. They laid out the plan in the barn. The goal wasn't just defense anymore. It was disruption, dismantling, exposure of the next layer. Ramon's intel pointed to a logistics depot 3 towns over a known vulture hangout posing as a trucking company. But according to intercepted chatter, moving far more than produce, we hit their trucks, Caroline said. We bleed their supply lines. We scatter their couriers. We make them afraid to set foot in Montana. Fiona cleaned her weapon with practiced precision. You sure you're good to move? Caroline gave a faint smile. Pregnant, not paralyzed. Stick chuckled. Baby on board assault team. That's a first. Caroline secured her M110 and adjusted her sidearm holster. Then let's start a new chapter. The team loaded into the convoy and rolled out as the morning sun crested. It was a hub, a nerve center for whoever stood behind the vultures. Caroline raised her rifle and settled it into her shoulder, fine-tuning the scope. Through the crosshairs, she tracked two guards pacing the main gate, their movements slow and methodical. Shift change was less than an hour away. She noted a blind spot near the southwest corner and filed it away. The cameras were well placed, but there were no thermal sensors and oversight she intended to use. Fiona crouched beside her and whispered, "I've hacked the camera feed. I can loop visuals for about 3 minutes. Enough time to get inside and plant charges." Stick checked his crossbow bolts, their tips catching faint moonlight. "I'll take the power grid. A few charges on the transformers will put them down. Plenty of cover once things go loud." Ramon's fingers danced across his tablet, slipping through digital defenses. Camera loop engaged. Gate access unlocks in 30 seconds. They slipped through the fence, fluid and silent. Caroline's pulse quickened not from fear, but anticipation. 7 months pregnant or not, she was still the soldier she'd always been. Inside, crates marked medical supplies and construction equipment hid the truth. Pallet after pallet of firearms, explosives, encrypted radios. Enough to outfit a small army. "This is bigger than we thought," Caroline murmured. "They're not just moving goods. They're building firepower." A flashlight beam swept past them, close enough to scrape the air. Fiona flattened against a shipping container. Caroline's finger tightened on the trigger, then Fiona raised a hand. "Hold." The guard passed unaware. They moved fast, planning charges on support beams and data servers, syncing timers with Stick, who had already rigged the transformers. Ramon's voice cut in, urgent. "Secondary patrol inbound. Closing fast." Caroline didn't hesitate. "Exfiltrate. Now." Stick triggered the charges as they pulled back. The warehouse dropped into darkness. Explosions ripped through transformers and cum hubs. Alarms wailed, but the blackout shattered coordination. Mercenaries fired blindly into shadows. The team vanished into the woods as quietly as they'd come. Overcomes. Caroline's voice was steady. "This is just the start. We hit their supply lines and make it clear we don't back down." Fiona smirked. Making powerful enemies. Caroline's gaze hardened. They made the mistake of targeting a pregnant farmer. That's their worst one. The warehouse fire painted the night sky in orange, visible for miles. From a secluded cabin 10 miles away, Caroline and her team watched the glow, knowing this was only the opening move. Inside the dim room, tension pressed in. Radios hummed as Ramon worked his laptop, peeling back layers of chatter. "They're in full panic," he said. "Backup convoys on high alert. Comms are fractured, some channels compromised or dead." "And listen to this." Distorted voices spilled out, talking about contractors en route and shadow operations activating. Fiona, cleaning her MP5 with care, raised an eyebrow. "Hornet's nest. These contractors aren't standard mercs. More professional. More dangerous." Caroline nodded. "This wasn't just a raid. It was a message. And it painted a target on us." Stick leaned against the wall, cigarette glowing. "Deep pockets. Dark motives. You think they'll fold?" "No," Caroline said quietly. "They're already moving assets we didn't even know existed." Outside, wind whispered through the pines, carrying smoke and damp earth, a sharp contrast to the cold focus inside. Maps, radios, and plans spread across the table like a war room. Caroline's hand rested on her belly, feeling a faint movement. This fight wasn't just about her land anymore. It was about the life growing inside her and a future that shadows like these would gladly erase. Ramon looked up from his screen. "I'm tracing the contractors' comms. They're operating out of a network of safe houses across 3 states. Heavily armed, highly trained, and they don't mess around." Fiona's voice was calm but firm. "If we want to stay ahead, we have to hit fast and hard again. No more half measures." Caroline's eyes burned with resolve. "Then we give them exactly that. We're ghosts in their machine now, and ghosts don't leave quietly." The team fell into a brief, solemn silence, a shared moment of resolve before the storm. This war was no longer just about survival. It was about legacy, and Caroline Harfield was ready to fight for hers. The safe house hummed with quiet energy. Ramon's fingers tapped softly against the keyboard. Radios crackled intermittently, and low murmurs of strategy filled the cramped room. Maps covered a battered metal table, spread like a battlefield blueprint, each pin and marker revealing the scale of the operation taking shape. Ramon didn't look up from his laptop, his voice steady but urgent. I trace their comes through multiple proxy servers and encrypted hops. The trail leads to a shell logistics company in a neighboring state. On paper, it hauls farm equipment and supplies. Off the books, it's the central node moving men, weapons, and contraband through rural corridors. Caroline's eyes narrowed, her body tightening. How big is it? Bigger than we thought, Ramon said, pulling up satellite images. At least 3 warehouses in key locations. Several training camps disguised as construction sites. They're exploiting thin law enforcement coverage to move gear across borders. This isn't a ragtag gang anymore. It's a private militia with serious funding. Fiona crossed her arms. So the vultures were just pawns. We were cleaning up the mess while the real players kept building. Exactly, Ramon said. Their coms are tighter now, but there are weak points, especially this transfer hub near the state line. Lightly guarded, but critical. Disrupt it and their supply chain stumbles. Caroline stood, her voice cutting cleanly through the tension. We stop playing defense. We take the fight to them. Strike fast. Strike hard. Stick leaned against the wall, flicking a cigarette butt to the floor, his half grin in place. Sounds right. Hit them where it hurts. Leave them reeling. Caroline's gaze moved across the team, steady and trusting. This is bigger than my farm, bigger than any of us. We're dismantling an entire operation, and we don't stop until every piece is gone. Ramon marked the target again on the map. This transfer hub is our best opening. Timing's tight, but if we do it right, it goes offline before they know what hit them. Caroline grabbed her gear. Then that's where we're going. We don't wait for the storm. We make it. The team moved immediately, loading weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. The calm before the next fight. Under a moonless sky, they moved like shadows through the dense forest surrounding the transfer hub. Cool air carried pine and damp earth. Every step was deliberate, every breath controlled, boots crunching softly against dead leaves, threatening exposure if discipline slipped. Caroline led, rifle slung low but ready, night vision sharp over her eyes. 7 months pregnant, her movements were still fluid, her focus unbroken. She wasn't just a farmer. She was a tactician, a soldier shaped by years of combat. Fiona moved beside her, scanning ahead, muscles tight, watching for heat signatures and sudden motion. Stick and Ramon covered the rear, suppressed weapons and signal jammers ready, prepared to sever any call for help. The perimeter fence came first, old but solid rusted chain link topped with razor wire. 2 sentries moved in slow, predictable patterns. Timing mattered. Caroline raised her hand in a slow, controlled signal. Fiona slipped forward, fixing a jammer to a nearby utility pole. With a quiet click, the cameras blinked out, their feeds looping into static. Moments later, Stick stepped from behind a large oak and dropped the sentries with silent shots. Their bodies hit the ground in muted thud. No alarms. No chaos. Just quiet efficiency. Inside the compound stretched a sprawling maze of shipping containers, fuel tanks, and idle trucks. Most crates were labeled as agricultural goods, a clever ruse concealing stacks of weapons, explosives, and encrypted communication devices. Caroline's eyes narrowed. The scale of the operation was staggering. Ramon moved quickly, planting signal disruptors and hacking into the compound's terminals. Communications are going dark, he whispered urgently. They won't know what hit them until the blackout spreads. Caroline methodically placed timed explosives along critical support beams and wiring conduits. The charges would cripple their infrastructure and buy valuable time. Suddenly, the distant echo of footsteps cut through the night. Fiona caught Caroline's arm, her whisper barely audible. 2 guards east side. The team froze, dissolving into the shadows, barely breathing as the unsuspecting men passed within feet. Caroline's heart hammered, but her grip stayed steady. With a final glance at her team, she activated the detonator. The compound erupted into controlled chaos. Explosions tore through metal frameworks, flames clawed at the sky, alarms screamed briefly before dying into silence. From the safety of the tree line, Caroline keyed her radio. Operation successful. Supply line severed. Next objective, dismantle the network. Fiona's smirk carried through her voice. They're going to regret ever stepping onto your land. Caroline's tone was cold and resolute. Let them come. We're ready. The glow from the burning transfer hub faded, but the echo of the night's chaos lingered like a pulse in the air. Caroline and her team slipped back into the shadows, retreating to their forest-hidden safe house. The calm they found was fragile. The storm was already gathering. Inside the dim, makeshift command center, Ramon's fingers flew over his keyboard, decoding frantic transmissions. His face glowed in the screen's light as he delivered the news. They're calling in reinforcements. Private military contractors. Heavier firepower. Better training. They're sealing highways, setting up checkpoints, increasing patrols across multiple counties. This isn't a simple raid anymore. It's a coordinated response. Fiona loaded magazines with practiced precision, her jaw tightening. We poked a hornet's nest. They're flexing to remind us who owns the region. This just got a lot uglier. Caroline rested a hand on her belly, feeling the steady flutter inside, a quiet reminder of what was at stake. Her voice stayed calm, firm. We knew what we were walking into. They wanted a fight. Now they've got one. There's no stepping back. Stick flicked his lighter, the brief flame illuminating his grim smile. Looks like the vultures have a new landlord and he's pissed. No mercy coming our way. Caroline met his gaze, unyielding. Then it's our turn to make them regret every step they take on this land. She rose, stretching despite the weight and fatigue settling into her muscles, and gathered the team. We set new defensive layers. Traps, surveillance, perimeter alarms. Ramon, keep comms scrambled and monitored. Fiona, lead scouting and lock down overwatch. Stick, reinforce barricades and prep fallback positions. Outside, the night wind rustled through the pines, carrying distant engine noise and the hum of movement, the enemy's shadow drawing closer. Caroline's gaze swept her team, loyal, sharp, ready. This was no longer just defense. It was a war for survival, for legacy, for the future she carried inside, and whatever came next. They would be ready. By early morning, mist hung thick in the air, curling around towering pines and drifting low over Caroline's farmstead. What had once been quiet fields and barns now resembled a fortress, shaped by days and nights of relentless preparation. Trenches lined the fences, tripwires wove through trees, and camouflaged observation posts hid in the underbrush, turning the land itself into a weapon. Inside the barn's ramshackle command post, Ramon scanned drone feeds and intercepted radio traffic, fingers moving swiftly across keyboards and frequency dials. Convoy spotted. 2 clicks out. At least 3 armored vehicles and a squad of infantry moving in formation, he reported. Voice low and steady, Caroline stood atop the old grain silo, binoculars pressed to her eyes. Caroline studied the advancing force. The faint glow of headlights cut through the dawn haze, a slow, deliberate procession of blacked-out trucks and men in tactical gear. They had come prepared, heavily armed, coordinated, and ready for war. She turned to Fiona and Stick, already checking weapons and manning their positions. Hold your ground. Do not engage until I give the order. As the enemy reached the perimeter, the farm's defenses came alive. Concealed pits swallowed the lead vehicles, forcing the convoy into tight bottlenecks. Razor wire snares tangled boots and wheels alike, scattering soldiers and halting vehicles in their tracks. Remote charges detonated along the fence line, throwing dirt and debris skyward, shattering formations and sowing confusion. Gunfire tore through the morning stillness. But Caroline's team moved with unshakable discipline. Fiona laid down suppressive fire from a hidden ridge, each shot precise and relentless. Stick picked off scouts attempting to flank, his crossbow bolts finding their marks in the undergrowth. Through the chaos, Caroline's calm voice cut through the radio static. They thought this was an easy target. They were wrong. Stay sharp. Move fast. We own this land. With tactical precision, she directed the counterattack, flanking exposed squads, exploiting weak points, and turning the terrain against them. One by one, the attackers faltered, their numbers becoming liabilities against a well-orchestrated defense. As the first light of dawn broke, the enemy began a slow tactical withdrawal, leaving behind smoldering vehicles and shattered morale. Caroline surveyed the battered field, her gaze steady. The farm was scarred, but it stood defiant. This was only the beginning. Smoke from the failed assault still hung thick in the crisp morning air, curling through the pines bordering Caroline's land. The sharp scent of burned rubber and scorched earth mixed with dew and pine needles. Caroline stood on the weathered porch of her farmhouse, eyes fixed on the distant tree line where the retreating convoy disappeared into shadow. The battle was won, But the war was far from over. Behind her, the team gathered quietly. Fiona checked her weapon's safety with practiced care. Stick tightened the straps on his pack. Ramon monitored the radios for any sign of renewed movement. Exhaustion weighed on them all, but so did resolve. Caroline broke the silence, her voice calm and commanding. They came with everything they had, expecting brute force to break us. What they found was a fortress built on more than soil and fences. This farm is our home, our sanctuary, and a legacy worth defending. Ramon looked up, urgency sharpening his tone. Intercepted chatter from their command. They're regrouping contractors, heavier units. One final push before they disappear underground. Caroline's eyes hardened. Then we prepare for it. No surprises. Every path, every blind spot, every inch of this land is covered. They'll find nothing but traps and ghosts. She rested a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the faint flutter that reminded her why this mattered. This was no longer just about land. It was about protecting a future. Fiona's smile was fierce. They want war. They've got war. Stick cracked a dry grin. And they don't even know who they're dealing with. Caroline drew a deep breath as the morning sun washed the farm in gold. Let this be a warning to them and anyone else who thinks this place is easy prey. We're not just farmers. We're hunters. And we're always watching. The dawn illuminated fields battered but unbroken, scars of battle visible but far from defeat. This was the start of a new chapter, one written in strategy, resilience, and resolve. A chapter where the defender becomes legend. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.